German New Testament scholar Rudolf Bultmann famously said that if you turn on an electric light, you most certainly could not believe in demons. His point was clear. Living in the modern world of science and technology has forced many people to leave behind the pre-modern, pre-scientific, primitive beliefs that people generally held prior to the advent of light bulbs. Under this kind of liberal and intellectual influence, it became increasingly popular for biblical scholars to assert that the fourfold principalities, powers, rulers of the darkness, and spiritual hosts of wickedness in Ephesians 6:12 describe the evils that exist within socioeconomic political structures rather than real demonic spiritual enemies in the world. According to the likes of Bultmann and others, the way we need to understand the Apostle Paul is that we fight against impersonal social forces and nothing more. Paul, however, was more enlightened than Bultmann, light bulb or no light bulb. According to the inspired apostle, our conflict is with real personal adversaries, namely the devil and his cohorts, the demons. Reformed theologian Charles Hodge agreed with Paul and reminded his 19th century readers that the language of Ephesians 6:10-20 is not a figure of speech, it is something real and arduous. Warfare Review. We must not lose sight of the first principles that we have already considered. Be strong in the Lord and in the power of his might, connects us back to the resurrected, ascended, exalted, enthroned, and victorious Jesus. In order for us to be empowered for spiritual warfare, we must constantly rely on Christ, our risen Lord. Put on the whole armor of God calls us to be protected fully with all that God supplies us in this battle. The purpose is so that we can stand and fully resist the wiles of the devil. Now, in verses 12 and 13, Paul further explains why all of this is so vitally important. Not against flesh and blood. As the apostle gives us the rationale for putting on the whole armor of God, he begins verse 12 by stating a negative, for we do not wrestle against flesh and blood. Here Paul presses upon us the main reason that we must make good use of God-provided armor. We must do this because of the supernatural, crafty nature of our conflict. He is not trying to scare us, but rather to sober us up to the hostile battle at hand. As Christians, we could tend to forget about this battle. The world's pleasures or worries can numb us. Perhaps we have accepted the world's mantra that things are getting better and evil is being removed and have therefore fallen under the delusion that there is no serious threat before us. We might become inactive in this fight, believing that spiritual warfare is a thing of the past. Here is where we must be especially on guard, because such thinking will inevitably lead us into great trouble. We must never forget that our fight is real. The word wrestle in the verse is key, as it defines the essence of our battle with our invisible opponents. Paul uses it figuratively to describe our struggle with evil forces. We might be surprised that he has used an athletic image in this passage rather than a military term. Wrestling was a popular sport in the Greco-Roman world, so this term would have resonated with Paul's readers. The apostle uses it to illustrate that in spiritual warfare we are in close-quarter combat, as with literal wrestling. The battle is similar to a hand-to-hand struggle. It is as close and intense as two wrestlers maneuvering against each other on a mat. Strong and strenuous effort all the way to glory is therefore required. This image is contrary to how some popular preachers portray the Christian life. It is not always a walk in the park. While for Christians this life is the best possible on this side of glory, they nonetheless have actual enemies who would love nothing more than to immobilize and defeat them. Christians are engaged in a holy war, a life and death spiritual battle. This war does not take place on a literal battlefield or in the streets during some popular uprising. Instead, it takes place in our minds, members, and hearts. When Paul says our struggle is not against flesh and blood, he uses a